Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going excellent. Yeah, we're rolling into the summer here. The heat is here. The events are here. We're starting to see athletes out there, so it's very exciting. And I'm also excited because today we have Alex Larson, a registered dietitian, joining us on the show.
Yes, this is a really fun episode. You actually got to do the interview, and I was saying, as we were talking about this episode, I was like, wow, it's been a while since you've done like a solo interview with a dietitian. I actually don't know that you have done one on this podcast. So I think this is just kind of interesting because when I'm talking to them, I'm sort of speaking a bit more generally, a bit more broadly, kind of with these like global issues facing athletes, whereas you're coming to these conversations with a bit more of a, here's what I'm hearing from my athletes. So you have a bit more of a direct line to what questions that some of your athletes are asking, and we can really dig into those.
Indeed, and it's often a bit of a therapy session as I talk about things that I'm confused about or seeing athletes struggle on. So hopefully that's a useful sort of way that we go about this in this episode.
Yes, and before we get into it, we will add the quick disclaimer that yes, this episode we do talk with Alex about weight loss. So if that is a topic that you don't want to hear about, if that's a topic that is triggering for you, please feel free to skip this episode. Definitely go back to, one of our previous episodes. We've had so many great dietitians on in recent months. Kristen Zeismer, Kylie Van Horn with Zoe Rome from the Your Diet Sucks podcast back in January. We talk about a lot of other topics. So if this is not the one for you, feel free to go back into our dietitian archives. All right. With that, let's get into it. After a quick word from our sponsor, we are here talking about Payable apps, specifically the Payable add-on that lets you take payments in a Google form.
That's right. And just recently, I've been doing some bike skill sessions with different cycling clubs and groups. And the one is taking e-transfers from over 20 people and trying to collect details about their skill level, what they want for lunch, and then also trying to collaborate on or coordinate the payments. So they're doing e-transfers. So this is a bunch of emails that are coming into volunteers' inboxes, and then also payments that they're going to have to track. Whereas with Payable, it would be a nice spreadsheet, and it would just indicate in one of the columns paid or not paid, and then you could chase those people via the handy email also in the spreadsheet. So for those, especially in volunteer organizations, but even if it's your business, you don't have a lot of extra time to spare, and you do want to get paid. So this is a great no commitment, low cost way for you to get that done.
Yeah, that's what I do with all of my authors whenever they're selling books in real life, or just giving them to friends and family. It's way easier for them to just have a Google form where instead of them getting e-transfers or them having to check on e-transfers to me, all of that, it's just boom, done in the Google form, keeps things very organized. And you can find out more over at payableapps.com/athlete, where I believe we also have some good bonuses and good discounts and stuff for people who use that link. So we'll include that in the show notes. Again, payableapps.com/athlete. All right, let's get into this episode with Alex Larson.
All right, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm very excited today. We have Alex Larson here. She is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and we have been watching Alex on Instagram and learning all about her, and I was like, we need to have her on the show. And so finally it's come together. We have you. You're here. Thank you for coming.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe just start off a little bit. Tell us, what is, you say registered dietitian nutrition. Tell us a bit about, I know there's all of the nuance of that. So maybe just tell us a little bit about what you do and what those titles might mean.
Yeah. So I work exclusively with endurance athletes, but my base is that I am a registered dietitian. And so to be a registered dietitian, you usually will have a degree in nutrition, whether it's a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. And I think nowadays you actually have to have a master's as well. Back in the day, we just needed, either a bachelor's or a master's. And then usually you do some sort of like internship training, and then you have to pass a national exam to get that credential. So if you hear the term nutritionist, that doesn't always guarantee that they're a credentialed registered dietitian. But typically, if you hear RD or registered dietitian nutritionist, that you know that they've been through all of the steps. In certain states, you can use the term nutritionist and not actually have any like credentialed education background. So you have to just be a little cautious about who you get your nutrition information from, because we know that there's a lot of it out there that's being shared around. It could be really overwhelming. And so part of my job and what I'm really passionate about is how can we translate all of that science and information that we see in research studies and in textbooks, and how can we translate to that something that's really applicable and usable for someone in their everyday life. So while I work with endurance athletes, runners, cyclists, triathletes, I want to help bridge the gap of how can we fuel you well for life. If you've got a really busy career, maybe kids, you're married, like all of those nuances of life, and also a training plan, and how can we fuel you for all of those things and have it be sustainable, something that you can easily do long term.
I love it. I love it. And you have a whole team there
I do.
in your business, which is awesome. We were talking before we started recording. I sometimes am critical of some of these other, there's the sport coaches, but then there's the registered dietitians, the nutritionists, the performance, mental performance consultants. Sometimes it's to get them working and get those people and those referrals is sometimes tough, which sounds odd probably from your position, but it is good when someone's set up and we can get the athlete to them.
Yeah. So when I first started, when I went full-time in my business, it was just me. And then about a year into that, I started to get pretty busy where I couldn't time-wise take on any more clients. And so I brought on Hannah first. She has like me, has a triathlon background, but she's done like marathons and other cycling events too. And then Mary came a few months after her, and she is kind of my run guru. She's run a lot of different marathons. She's worked with some ultra runners. And so between the three of us, we kind of just make each other better. Like it was one of the things, like when we became a team, I was excited to have like someone to share the load, but also now like I have the brain power of three of us, and we're always bouncing ideas off of each other and have this nice little friendship to support one another. And it's just been amazing. They've been with me for 3 years now.
Yeah, I've always been jealous of when there's a team, right? Like in the show House, like not that I'm crazy, like House, but that just where you're bouncing stuff off the team, and this person's an expert in this and this, and what would you do in this situation? And yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. Okay, and then you've caught the gravel bug, if we can call it that. You were, you have been a triathlete.
I used to have the triathlon bug, yeah. Okay. And then I had kids, and I have 3 kids now. The youngest is almost 2. And so training for 3 sports just isn't really feasible right now with my schedule. And so I knew I wanted to get back into endurance sports. And so last summer, we've worked with a lot of gravel cyclists. It's this very growing sport. And I'm a little hesitant to spend all of my time on the busy paved roads these days. It's just kind of scary when you see all of these stories of accidents that are happening and cyclists getting killed. And so I was like, I think I need to get on some more country roads. And we have, where I live, there's both dirt roads and paved roads. And so I bought a gravel bike and I started training, and now I'm like guzzling the Kool-Aid here in the cycling world. And it's been
literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Like I've just been all in. Like the past 5-6 months, I've been training like crazy on the bike trainer, and now I can get outside. And I've got a race here in a few weeks.
Okay. And you're in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, I'm in like northern Minnesota.
Is that where you'll race, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I'll go up to Grand Marais, Minnesota. They've got a few races up the shore throughout the summer. Okay. And so I'll do one here Memorial Day weekend. And then there's another one they have like at the end of September in Two Harbors I might do. And then I might actually go out to North Dakota in July. There's some fun races out there as well.
Yeah, all those states along there, like Michigan's really big in gravel and distance stuff. And then, Wisconsin's, if you get into the right areas, is very cycling, into cycling. Yeah.
Yeah, there's it's called Kuyana, Minnesota, is really growing in their like mountain biking and gravel scene.
Cool.
It's kind of becoming a little bit of a touristy area for cyclists. So yeah, it's definitely growing, this whole gravel sport, and I'm like totally in it. Like I'm just it's like my husband's just like, what is going on? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm loving it. Like this,
Seems
it's
a
just
lot like triathlon again. You're just calling it something different.
well, here's the thing that I've discovered is when I just focus on one sport, I get really good much faster versus trying to train for three sports and just seeing like
Mm.
slow gains in each. That was something I noticed over the winter. I was like, oh, I'm getting really strong on the bike. Like, I think I'm stronger on the bike than I was like when I was training for Ironman Wisconsin like 10 years
Okay.
ago. So
Yeah.
that's been kind of interesting to see that difference.
Okay. I wonder, our big topics today, we're going to hit the weight loss thing. We're going to do a bit of, red S stuff. So those are familiar topics, I think, to the listeners, but maybe you just keep continuing to pull on that gravel trend. Certainly there's a lot of our listeners are gravel cycling or dabble from mountain biking or road towards gravel. So I wonder
Mhm.
when you're consulting with people, like what would be like common issues people have with gravel that are maybe different, right? They've maybe come from triathlon. They should have known a bunch of stuff. They're riding bikes, they're eating, they're doing this stuff. What's different when you come to gravel? Like, what do you find are common issues that someone might come for?
Yeah, I think across the board with the endurance athlete community, underfueling is something I see quite often, whether that's either on the bike, they're underfueling, maybe they just, the thought of like consuming that many carbs per hour just kind of scares them. And so they're just not taking in enough, or they don't know how to easily get in enough carbs per hour, especially if they're doing some longer rides. Um, and then even in their day to day, like if they're putting in some really high volume training, a lot of people, because they're so busy during the day, maybe they like squeezed in their morning workout, they're trying to get in as much work as possible, and then they're like busy in the evenings, they're not eating a big enough breakfast or lunch, and then they might have this massive dinner and then kind of graze throughout the evening because they're still hungry, and that leads to some underfueling as well. So that's, I think, across the board, doesn't matter what sport it is, the most common thing that I see. But for cyclists, whether they're triathlon or gravel cyclists, I have this saying, it's called the bike is the buffet.
Right.
Because a lot
Yeah.
of like cycling races have kind of become an eating contest within a race.
Yeah.
We're seeing them consume quite high rates of
I don't know.
carbohydrates.
Did you
And
see the weekend? There was the new record bike time, I think is what they did, but it was 200 grams now per hour. Was
that does not surprise me. I
yeah.
had heard a rumor. One of our clients had ridden with Jonas Vingegaard, and he had shared with him that there's certain athletes during certain parts of the tour that were taking 200 grams of carb an hour.
It's
My
wild.
guess was that it was the guys that were like the like workhorses up the hill, like trying to get
Mm,
like him up the hill. That was my thought. I'm like, I bet it's those guys.
yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It really just comes down to gut tolerance. And if you're putting out that much power on the bike, you got to have the fuel there to do it. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but it's
Yeah.
just funny because 10 years ago, the recommendation was like 60 grams of carb an hour.
Well,
And
and that's
now
I
we're,
often say like everyone was vilifying Gatorade and saying like yeah, you're good, like the osmolarity, and then I was like, what happened to osmolarity?
yeah, not even a concern anymore at this point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else gravel wise? Like the one thing I'll maybe cue you towards, and maybe you don't see it. Maybe this is more what I see, but like the not being able to take your hands off the handlebars
Yeah.
and like eat or drink or even grab your straw because you're on more technical or loose terrain.
Yeah.
Do you see that ever? Like,
Yeah, I see it more with mountain bikers than I do gravel. But I would suppose with like gravel riding, when you're on a more technical course, that you're really not able to take your hands off the handlebars. It does get more challenging. So you have to be kind of strategic in looking at the course. Where would it make the most sense for you to get maybe more of a bolus amount of fuel
right.
versus like sipping small amounts of a hydration mix. But I am a really big fan of the vest because it's so easy to just grab that straw
Yeah.
and take in fuel and hydration while you still have your hands on the handlebars. I think um, the other thing too is weather. If you are doing a race that maybe it's raining and you love to fuel with like real food, and like your Uncrustable is going to disintegrate pretty quick if it's in a downpour. So
Yeah.
thinking like logistically of like weather, high winds too. It's hard to take your hands off the handlebars for a long period of time there. So it's hard to take gels or energy
Mm-hmm.
chews or things that are going to require like a wrapper. And if that case, then I would look at having a very high carb hydration mix in your vest. Or like some sort of bladder on your back so that you can still get in a good amount of carbs and
Sure.
hydration during that.
We have a race, Paris to Ancaster. It's like a spring classic. It just happened. It's always at the end of April. And that one seems to be, I don't know if it's people coming off the indoor trainer, living in northern environments like yourself, and um, or just like a lot of mountain bike gravel people doing something that's, they used to call it a mountain bike race, but it's a road race is what it is. There's just like a couple of sections on it. And so the groups are very big. The winds, like you say, there's usually some rain or something. And people will say exactly what you say, like, I'm going to have 2 Cliff Bars and a couple gels. And it's like every one of those food products are still in their back pocket at the end. And they didn't even get their bottles. Like they've maybe had half of one bottle, but, and it's so common. Like I would bet if someone just said they did Paris answer, I would almost bet that happened to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you're on the trainer all winter long, like you just like have this little table in front of you, you set your little buffet up, like it's so easy. And then like for me, I was like, oh, I got to get outside. Like I got to change this up. So even a couple months before I got off the trainer, I was using some of those products like in my bottle or switching it up just to kind of prep for that. And then like for me, I'm a huge fan of hydration mixes in fluids because you're already having to carry
Mm-hmm.
water on you. You might as well put a good dose of carbs and electrolytes in there. And so, yeah, just practicing getting enough, getting as much as you need to stay hydrated, getting those carbs in. Because it's one thing I see is people don't finish their bottles on time and then they get behind that way.
Right.
And it's like, I don't care how much carbs is in there. If you're not drinking your bottles, you're not getting enough. So I need you to I was actually talking to some gals at the camp I was at a month ago because they're like, oh, I'm not finishing my bottles. I'm like, think about it this way. If you want to do a 24-ounce bottle an hour and you're going to drink every 15 minutes, that would be taking like 6, 7, 8 gulps of fluid every 15 minutes. So count your gulps. Like, because you
Okay.
think like taking a shot.
Like 2 ounces a gulp or something. Is that what
It's like 1 ounce a gulp usually. If you think
okay.
like a shot is usually an ounce, so it's
Okay.
like
I like this. Yeah, this is science. Okay.
yeah. So like one big gulp would be an ounce. So if you're counting those, they count 1, they count up to 8, and then you're like, okay, the next 15 minutes go by. Try and make sure you get another 6 to 8 in, and then usually by the end of that, you're close to that 24-ounce.
Okay. And is that where
So
you base for the hourly? Is sort of like that would be like a big water bottle per
that
hour.
would, yeah, it would kind of depend on the hydration or the fluid loss. If so, we would do like a sweat test in advance. So on average, athletes lose around a liter an hour in fluids. So 24-ounce bottle, which sounds like a lot, but really like you're still behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be a little dehydrated when you finish a race, but you don't want to be really dehydrated and seeing performance decline. So
Yeah.
that's where it's like, how much can we hydrate you to keep you from getting too dehydrated, but also prevent overhydration as well.
Sure. And I guess also in that assumption, and it depends, is, we're assuming cycling is in the summer and you're working fairly steady.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some athletes, they lose even more in like those really hot and humid. I mean, if you're going down to like Texas and doing some of those, is there like a hotter than hell race down there that's gravel? I mean, they're probably losing more like a liter and a half. So you're probably having to do close to like a bottle and a half an hour for those really like 100-mile.
Have you gotten any of these like a big, I call it like a jug. It's like a jug of juice because it's like you have all the sugar in it, but they're like the 33 ounces. They're like full liter bottles. Have you gotten any of these?
I don't have any myself, but I usually will just do like, I have a 2-liter
of course.
vest. So I will usually use that and then carry bottles if I need to on the bike if I'm doing that long of a ride.
No, I do like them. Like it's nice for, as you say, like you're trying to drink a bit more, and even if you're on an hour ride, but then a lot of people don't like to use the packs on every ride or something. It has been really good, but it does depend a bit on frame size. That's the only thing, is these like 1 liter bottles don't fit into tiny frames very well.
Yes, exactly. So there's some logistics that I find with athletes like do your homework, right? Like figure out what's your sweat rate, maybe in cooler weather, in hotter weather, figure out how you're going to have to adjust your hydration rate, what you're going to have to carry on your bike, how far you can go before you get to maybe an aid station and you can replenish fluids. Because it's not just about like performance, it's also like safety. Like you don't want to get too dehydrated and end up with heat stroke. You don't want to be stranded out there waiting to get picked up. Like those types of things can take you out of a race pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I guess that would be a service that you would do. It would be like this race plan or something like that. I don't know if do you have a fancier name for it?
I don't know, like fueling race strategy. Like to me, it's not just about creating the strategy, because some people were like, oh, 2 weeks before the race, like, Alex, can you help me put together my strategy? I'm like,
text them like morning or evening before, and you're like,
yeah. Like I have a race in 2 weeks, and I'm like, we should have been working on
first
this. Like,
gels you've ever taken in your life?
Yeah, like for me, it's like, let's get as much information as possible up front. Like, where are you at fueling right now? When is your race? How much are we going to need you to be fueling then? Let's gradually work your way up to where you need to be so that it feels easy. It feels second nature. Because in a race, like there's a lot going on. You've got like traffic, you've got which route do you have to like, go left or right? Like there's so many things you're thinking about. And nutrition can be easily forgotten, and then you get behind. So it's like, let's make this second nature so that you can just focus on executing the race, executing that nutrition plan, because you know exactly what you need to do. You've practiced it. It's a well thought out plan, and it gets you start to finish feeling really great.
Okay. All right. Well, those are good. Those are sort of like the softball. So we're going to get into weight loss now.
Yeah. Love that.
And so we were speaking beforehand that, it's such a big thing. It's a sensitive thing. But it is a common, I know I work mostly with masters. We're speaking to adults here, I think, obviously.
Yeah. And I don't work with youth athletes. So I'm
okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. My specialty is they've got to be 18 or older.
Okay. Now, the clientele, like I would say our average athletes, like say 50, and we have on either side of that, obviously, but we're starting to talk about menopause, the food we used to eat, like I've ate like this for 50 years, and then now I've put on 10, 15 pounds. But now they're telling me to drink 200 grams of sugar. We're not telling you to drink. That's for certain people. But, we're trying to fuel and avoid red S. So the question I'm going to ask you to start off with is sort of like, how can a master's endurance athlete lose weight while training for cycling, gravel cycling?
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance between the two. When athletes come into our program, they usually have tried already a few different things to lose some weight. And the common things that I hear is, I stopped being able to finish my workouts. My energy levels tanked, and my hunger levels skyrocketed, because they typically, when you think of like weight loss, all you hear is like, oh, exercise more, eat less. Well, they're already exercising plenty. Right. Yeah. So they're like, oh, I guess I got to eat less. And so they'll start restricting and they'll eating less. And then all of like everything kind of falls apart. Their training suffers. They feel terrible. So they're like, well, this isn't working. So what do I do? So for us, what we find is it's a very, very individualized process. So every single athlete that comes in and they have body composition goals, we try and treat them as an individual. It's not like we just give them the same diet plan across the board. Like we look into every aspect of their life. We look at how they're eating, and we kind of figure out, okay, how can we work with what you're currently doing with your nutrition and enhance it and have it support body composition, but still have you performing in your training and your races really well. And so it's kind of a fine balance. The number one thing is we want to see very gradual body composition shifts. We don't want to see any like drastic dips in weight. We want this to be the slow and steady progress, because then that tends to be mainly body fat loss, and we can keep and maintain the muscle. So that's number one, is making sure they come in and understand that this is going to be a long-term process. This isn't going to be like a quick fix kind of thing. And we want to build a routine, a structure in how they eat, so that when they do reach that body composition goal, it's really easy for them to maintain it, that we're not seeing this roller coaster of like dropping weight, gaining weight, dropping weight. We want this to be something that's going to be maintained
Right.
long
Like
term.
stopping eating is a thing you could do, but it's not sustainable. Whereas you're saying like
Correct.
learning to cook a couple meals
Yeah,
or
like building the tools and strategies for them and the knowledge for them to feel really confident in their food choices. Because the other thing is like they're constantly second guessing their food decisions. Like, am I eating enough? Am I eating too little? Should I be eating this? Then like we want to offer clarity and confidence in their food choices. The other thing is we want to fuel their workouts really well. A lot of times they'll think like, oh, I can just like take less, I take less sugar during my workouts and I like put myself at a calorie deficit that way.
Yeah.
That's going to backfire. You don't diet on the bike or in your workouts. It's a big no-no because that's where you see injuries come into play. That's where you see like epic hunger later on in the day because you're so behind on calories and nutrition the rest of the day that people feel like sluggish. They feel starving. They feel sugar cravings, and then eventually their willpower is going to die out. Like the body's always going to win in terms of like
especially that cravings. To me that's like a threat to the body is like we have gone so deep and been so depleted that there's going to be this like rebound.
Our body is really good at surviving. Like it will do whatever it takes. And so like when it gets in that much of a deficit, like it will win. So it's like people like, oh, I just am too weak, or like I've addicted sugar. And I'm like, no, like it's just starving. Like it's just really hungry. Like let's just optimize nutrition and get it in a happy state so that we can be strategic and where we can put you at a calorie deficit and see the weight come down in a nice, slow and steady manner, but not see performance decline.
Okay. So what I think I'm hearing then is, we sort of have our breakfast, maybe we train, we fuel the training, maybe we have a recovery meal. Then is it more sort of like an evening strategy then, if there is something like that? Is that sort of the rough idea?
It depends. I'm not going to throw that you're going to hear me say that a lot. It depends. So it depends on when they're working out, right? So if they are someone that works out like right away in the morning, then it's like, okay, let's fuel the workout and then have a really solid breakfast to kickstart recovery and get you ahead of the nutrition. I will say front loading nutrition earlier on in the day, more nutrition earlier in the day is probably one of the number one biggest things that we help athletes do, is making their breakfast much more substantial, more protein at breakfast. It helps regulate hunger throughout the day. It helps with just better energy levels. It helps stabilize blood sugars throughout the day. It kickstarts that recovery process. If you worked out right away in the morning, it helps those muscles rebuild, repair. It gets you ready for the next workout. If you're doing like a 2 a day, maybe you're working in the afternoon or you have another workout the next morning. There's so many benefits to a really solid breakfast. Same thing with lunch. I see people that will have just a stingy lunch. When I'm saying stingy lunch, it might be like a sandwich and a cup of soup, or maybe like a salad with, you might put some like extra things on the salad, but like that's not a meal to me. Like a meal is plenty of protein. I'd say like at least 25, 30, 35 grams of protein, some carbohydrates in there, fruit and or vegetables, some healthy fats. Like make it a full big meal. Like to me, sometimes when I have a meal, I'm like, oh my God, this is so much food. But then by the time I eat it, I'm like, oh, I feel like really satisfied and I can go like 3-4 hours feeling good energy, not getting hungry again. And then maybe it's 3:30 and I'm like, oh, I'm getting a little hungry. I'm going to have a little snack and then I'm going to be ready for a nice, solid, balanced dinner. So structuring that day in that sense, so you're not kind of grazing throughout the day mindlessly, I think is really helpful for people to get a handle on the body composition. It also helps you not have those sweet cravings later on in the day because your body's like, I got enough. Like we did really well earlier on in the day. I don't need to snack, endlessly throughout the night until I go to bed, kind of thing. So those are probably the biggest things that we will adjust with athletes. And sometimes it takes a while. Like if I had one athlete I can think of, she owned a very large company. Her work was her life. And she hardly ate anything during the day. And since she had this big dinner, and then we completely swapped everything where she ate structured meals earlier on in the day. And then finally she's like, I'm starting to see some weight loss. It took us like a long time to make that shift. But finally she was like, I'm finally starting to see the weight tick down. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. But it was a journey for her.
Sure. So now, do you think about that as like the calories are one thing, but are we moving past this like energy in, energy out equation that is impossible to measure, to say like also her sleep would have been better, likely she maybe
Yeah.
got to bed sooner because she wasn't
Mm-hmm.
digesting a massive meal, maybe it was she wasn't waking up at 3 a.m starving, or
Mm-hmm.
blood sugar swing or something. Do you think that that's a big part of this, where it's like when we're talking about energy availability versus the losing weight, is the, like some of that stuff too that's getting
Yeah, I
normalized?
the one thing that I see from athletes is they will come to me and they're like, "Oh, I just worked out and I burned like 800 calories or like 1,000 calories," or like if they did a big long hard ride, like, "Oh, I burned like 2,000 calories in this big long ride." And I'm like, yeah, we're not going to pay attention to that. Like your Garmin watch that's calculating calories is wildly
Yeah,
inaccurate. There's
yeah,
actually a research study done on all the different devices, and they were like anywhere from like 20 to 40+%
sure,
in
yeah.
off of what you actually are burning. So I'm like, we're going to ignore that number. We are going to look at, okay, what's our baseline nutrition? Like if you, based off of, how much you're training, your age, weight, height, um, like what do we need to for sure get in your day? And then let's look at your training and make sure we're going to fuel that. I kind of think of like fueling your workout kind of separate from that baseline nutrition.
Right.
Let's make sure we fuel this workout really well. And then let's make sure that baseline nutrition, we're at a bit of a calorie deficit and we're optimizing nutrition for recovery. Because
Hmm.
for endurance athletes, because of the volume and frequency that they're training, any other opportunity in the day that they're eating to me is an opportunity to help them recover in my mind,
Right.
because of just how frequently and how much I mean, when they're doing like 8 to 12 plus hours of riding, I'm like, that's a lot of
Hmm.
training. And
Yeah.
so let's really take advantage of your other meals to help your body recover, bounce back, and get ready for the next workout.
Hmm. Okay. Now, on those meals, you're still thinking, when you say protein, like you're thinking that sort of balanced meal. I've seen those as like a checklist of like sort of the macros, and then are you eating slowly or something like that? Is that sort of like what you would do, something like that, where it's like I have like a little checklist for my meal and what's a good meal?
Yeah, I like to give some things like when you look at your meal, like where's the protein? That's usually the first thing that I look for. I'm like, where's your carbs? Are we getting enough carbs in there? Um, where's our fruit and our vegetable, because we need the micronutrients there. So just giving someone a checklist, I think, can be helpful, like a mental checklist, not like an actual
Yeah.
like I don't want this to feel like too like strict or regimented. I want things to feel like flexible. But just giving them a guidelines of like, this is what a meal looks like, an actual like legit meal, not
Hmm.
like a small, like a large snack that you can like call them. Like some people are like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and calling
Right.
that a meal. I'm like, that's not a meal.
Or
Like
like an,
let's
an an apple and what is it, 8 almonds or 6 almonds or
yeah,
something
like
like that.
yeah. So like let's make this a substantial meal that's going to get you what you need, and then that way at the end of the day you're not short 50 grams of protein and you're trying to like do a double scoop of protein powder in a shake to try and get your protein in that way. Like I want you to get it through food first and then maybe supplement with a protein shake where it feels convenient.
Okay. Do you do like testing, or yeah, I assume that depends too, but like as far as like either like like a resting metabolic rate, or I see a bit of blood stuff on your website too. Like what do you think, or is it sort of like you start as simple as possible and I guess get more complicated, I guess?
Yeah, the only we don't require any blood testing of any sort. We typically, if we don't have, I mean, sometimes athletes will come. They've maybe had a DEXA scan or an in-body scan where they have like a body fat percentage, but typically just age, height, weight, activity level is kind of where we start, and getting like a BMR and then adjusting with that activity factor to get kind of an idea of like, okay, what's our maintenance calories? Where do we need to be at if we want to lose weight? Where do we need to be at if they want to gain muscle? Really basing it off of their goals, and then looking at their day and seeing, okay, where's their gaps in their day? How are we looking at in terms of timing? Are they short on protein most days of the week, or are some days they're way over in calories and some days they're way under? Then okay, let's work on consistency and getting things to be a little bit more steady in terms of like all over the place is not helpful,
Right. Like
because
the weekend, or sorry, the weekday diet and like fasting through work and then like party all weekend and make it back up and end up worse off than we could have been.
Yeah, our body likes more consistency. So it's like, how can we build a nice structure like that we can do consistently long term? So everyone's a little different in what we see, but that's typically where we start, is kind of identifying where their nutrition should be based on their goals, seeing where they're at currently, and then how can we align how they're currently eating with where they need to be in a way that's easy for them. Because it's not just about giving them numbers and saying, yeah, eat whatever you want as long as it fits in these numbers, like you're good. Because then they start eating weird things in the day, like they'll just eat this random tortilla because they're short like 30
Right.
grams of protein. I'm like, no, I want this to feel normal. And so we'll talk about like, oh, your breakfasts are kind of stingy, or like, oh, your lunches look beautiful, but there's no carbs in them. So like, what can we add to this meal to get you a little more carbs and a little better energy in the afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
So just making those like identifying things and talking about that with them, and like giving them the tools and strategies and knowledge for them to do that on their own after they graduate from our program.
Right. I love that you're saying, describing things more often in terms of like the actual food and the meal versus the carbs and the protein or something like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's certainly nice to give them targets to like visually see in a food journal, like, hey, this is where we want to be. This is where you're at most days. Like, let's talk about where in your day with food that we can align things more of where we want this to be. But I don't want them getting to like 3 o'clock and being like, oh, I'm out of calories. I can't eat the rest of the day. It's like, no, we need you to eat. Like, let's talk
Back
about
to
how
the rice cakes. Yeah.
we can adjust maybe your day so that it works out well. Or I have a cyclist right now who, when he was a massive overfueler, I think he has like a very fast metabolism. And so he would kind of panic anytime he even got a little bit hungry, and he would have like a whole bunch of calories. And so he was like, he was trying to lose a little bit of weight, but he's like, I can't lose weight. I'm just kind of staying at this same weight. So it's kind of been a process to gradually bring his calories down in a way that feels good for him, and getting more strategic with that.
Okay. I guess maybe last thing probably around sort of this weight loss and energy availability. I think you spoke a lot to it there, that like they're sort of connected in some ways, which I like. I guess where I'm thinking here is, do you think that it's like the counting, or I guess how do you go about counting the macros or the calories with someone as like a starting spot, right? Like, okay, this is what we're going to target, or is it more on that like meal or plate to start? Like, would that be your preferred, or what do you think?
I'm kind of a hybrid of both. I think it's helpful to give them macro and calorie targets if that makes sense for them. If there's someone that maybe, let's say they had a history of like disordered eating, or they've journaled like obsessively before, and that calorie counting like just sets them into like full anxiety and panic, then I'll be like, okay, we're not going to set a calorie target, but maybe we'll just set a protein target, or maybe we'll just set a carbohydrate target, and start there and really work with the person, because I want to make sure I preserve their mental health with food in their body, and
Yeah.
do this in a way that supports them mentally. So I kind of identify those things up front, like, okay, what makes sense to start with? Sometimes I'll give them like all three macros and the calories, and say, I don't want this to feel like a diet. Like, you don't have to try and align things perfectly every single day, but I just want to use this as like some guidelines to give you a visual of where we're shooting for, and have you be more thoughtful and kind of learning how your food choices translates to the nutrition that you're providing your body. So like, if we see one day their fat intake was super high, then I'm like, hey, well, let's look at the day. Like, oh, maybe they had a massive amount of peanut butter, or maybe they had like a whole avocado on their toast. And I'm like, okay, avocado is great, but it's like really high in fat, and it like puts you way over in calories here. And in order to bring that weight down, we might just need to be a little bit more cautious of portion size of these foods, or talk about like frequency of these types of foods all in one day, and having some balance in that. So giving them kind of that knowledge base and feeling more confident in what foods to put on their plate to align with what their needs are is kind of my objective with that, but also giving them some numbers. So I've worked with some athletes who've worked with someone more on like intuitive eating, but they're like, I still have no idea of like how many calories I should be eating. I was like, okay, well, let's give you some numbers to like work with here,
Hmm.
and just give them all of the information.
Right. Right. And at least see where you are. Right. I think that's where sometimes it's like people have no idea, what they did 10 minutes ago. So sometimes it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe they've journaled for months on end, but they have no idea like if it's right or wrong. So it's like, okay, let's come in and give you some guidance so that if you do journal in the future for maybe just a couple days to check in, you know what to look for.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the avocado. Someone, another coach in like nutrition thing here locally, we were at an event on the weekend. They were like, "Yeah, it was like," I was like, "So what is this thing that like you're finding with?" Because they work with people in menopause, and this, they said is the salads were just like turned out to be like 1,200 calories, like whatever. I don't know what it was. It doesn't matter what it was, but it was a lot. And so it was sort of just like refining the amount of olive oil and pumpkin seeds and all and avocado that was in this thing. And you maybe wouldn't even notice on the back end, but it's that sort of like, oh, it was all healthy, I guess. But
Yeah, all healthy things, but when you like the quantity and with all of it together, it can really be a very calorie dense salad.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Well, that was the sort of harder stuff, I guess. I think you did a good job with that.
Oh, well, thank you. I love talking about body count, so I find
Okay.
it interesting.
Okay. I mean, it is very common that people will shy away from it. I would maybe even be someone who shies away from it, as far as power and weight and stuff like that. So that's great to be
Yeah,
able to talk about
I
that.
I think that it can be done really well. There certainly can be ways that it can go wrong and ways that can be really harmful, but that's part of my job. I'm like, hey, that I'm the expert on this. Like, I should be able to talk about this and
Right.
do
If you
this in a
can't.
way that
Right.
helps people be the healthiest possible. And weight does not define health, but it definitely can be a part of the puzzle.
Hmm. Well, and I think that's, there's a couple things that keep me up as a endurance coach, especially to people in their mid and middle age. And that one with the weight loss and we'll call it red S for lack of a better term, but fueling stuff. That's like the tricky one because you do see people, you're 50, whatever age you are, and they're gaining weight. And you're like, well, from a performance standpoint, like, in theory, if we could control this a little bit, it would be beneficial. Uh, but, some is natural. And then it gets into this very sticky thing. So I think it is worth going to see someone who's familiar with that and in that clientele when things are changing, right? To see what can be done and what is healthy and what is not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Redis is certainly a concern um, with a lot of those restrictive style diets. Um, but from our standpoint, I think it's 100% possible to see body comp improvements without any signs of Redis in athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But it just takes a lot of strategy and thoughtful um, monitoring along the way.
Let's go to some easier one, a cool down, if you will, I guess. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Creatine. Are you seeing that? Are you using that with people as far as body composition? Who are you using with? What are some thoughts on creatine?
Yeah, creatine is having a moment right now in
It is. It seems like I say like when you've been in it for a long time.
everyone is talking about the creatine right now. Yeah. Well, I would say with creatine, it is probably one of the most researched supplements. And not just recently, but like decades of
Mm-hmm.
research. It's very safe as long as you take the recommended dose, 3 to 5 grams of creatine a day. And you certainly can get creatine through your diet, so like meat sources, but it's usually not enough. So there's that supplemental source to help load those creatine stores, and it helps, especially for endurance type athletes, potentially with like, let's say you want to like sprint. Like attack, towards the end of the race and like put yourself in position to be on the podium, or like power up a hill or sprint to the finish. Like that is where you probably would get the most benefit from creatine, is just having that more strength from your muscle. Um, I think what holds people back from using creatine is that fear of that little bit of water weight that you can gain from it. It's honestly only a couple pounds, but the recovery benefits, the cognitive benefits that they've found in research, they have shown that it can help with memory. They've seen, actually, there's one research study done that it can improve like symptoms of depression. it can help you build a little bit more muscle. Not like, I mean, I started taking creatine end of July 2024. And those first few weeks I started taking it, every time I would drink my little creatine beverage, I envisioned myself waking up the next morning being like swole, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm like, I don't know why this is in my head every time I drink this. And then every morning I'd wake up and it still has not happened. I do not look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Um, but we have this like association where it's like going to bulk us up. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for even cyclists, they don't want to bulk up. They just want to be stronger on the bike and have
Right.
more power. And so I am team creatine. I take it myself. I think it helps me recover from my workouts. Um, Women tend to have a little bit lower creatine stores than men do. So I think that we get a little bit more benefit out of it. And then if you're plant-based and you're not getting any creatine through your diet, you're going to have even lower creatine stores. So it can even provide even more benefit if you are, vegan or some sort of version of vegetarian. So I think it's for people that can make that informed decision. But personally, I think it's a good option. But you don't
Mm-hmm.
certainly have to take it. Um, yeah, I'm Team Creatine over here.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's I don't know if it's gonna go away. It probably will go away a little bit, but it does seem like more people are asking about it at least.
Yeah, I have heard a couple cases just anecdotally from athletes who started taking it and they actually saw like performance decline and they felt like their legs were really heavy and sluggish. And that was the only thing that they changed. And then when they went off of it, that feeling went away. It's honestly, I mean, I know a lot of people that take it, and that was only like two cases like that. So if you're just one of those rare people that you've noticed that, then I would just say, yeah, every once in a while there's someone that just doesn't respond to it
Yeah.
as most people do.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be great. Someday maybe we'll know, right? Like where
Yeah.
these variables are. You could figure out what you should take, your right mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The other one then I didn't send this to you beforehand, but the baking soda stuff, are you adding that into anyone's like race day plans? And now that that's like a little trendier and available, and if
Yeah.
so, are you doing it only with this like fancy expensive one? Or are you still using the good old like Arm& Hammer?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely come back in the conversation just from Morton's product, which is quite pricey. I think they even increased it recently. Um, we certainly have athletes that we have use it, but we want to first make sure that everything else, like the foundation of their nutrition and their fueling and hydration, is good before we start spending the extra money on the sodium bicarb product. You certainly can use baking soda, but you're just more at risk for having some adverse GI effects from that. That's one of the reasons why Morton created the product that they do, is they encapsulated it so that you don't have that potential GI issue. Um, I haven't tried it myself. I'm a little curious about it. I just know that it's not super palatable. Especially the Morton product is kind of like a mucus like
Yeah.
texture. So, we're already dealing with Morton gels with their like thick gel like gelatinous consistency, and then their hydration mix is worse from what it sounds like. But yeah, we certainly have athletes that use it. It's helpful for that like lactate threshold, clearing that, having less of that kind of burning feeling, especially later on in your race. But it's not like you have to use it. I mean, it's going to provide some performance benefit, but you're going to get more benefit out of just fueling yourself really well and hydrating yourself really well. And doing really well consistently with your nutrition throughout your training to get the biggest gains there and being able to perform well on race day.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. And then maybe we're working on a post too, so this might help us out. Around sort of like the cost of things, as you mentioned, the increase in prices there. When and we sort of touched on this a bit earlier, but we'll talk through it. Like when you're thinking about this fueling more, we talked about 100 grams and 200 grams of sugar, and $5 a gel or whatever it is, $8 a gel.
Yeah, that's up quick.
What so if someone's wanting to do a good job on this, but a little tight on the cash, where would you start them? I'm a endurance gravel racer, and I don't have a lot of money to spend on this, but I want to do a good job on it and perform well. Like, how would you set me up so I can hit that, whatever we're going to decide for me, 90 grams for my 5 hour, 100-mile gravel race? What would you suggest for me to, as sort of like what was like a budget, like a biker on a budget type thing?
Yeah, I think the hydration mixes are probably, when you look at like cost per gram of carb, I think the hydration mix is definitely is your most bang for your buck there. I mean, it does add up pretty quickly, but it's not as bad as the gels for sure. Um, you can certainly use some real food intermixed with some of your sports fuel. I like to use kind of both in training, whether that's like a Pop Tart or applesauce pouches or granola bars or like fig Newton bars. Like there's
Yeah.
lots of different products out there. You can even just use like jelly beans or Sour Patch Kids or
Yeah.
what are those Nerds clusters? People love those.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
there's lots of different things that you can do to save some dollars with fueling. There's a carbs fuel gel that's a little bit newer. It's newer on the market this past year. It's 50 grams of carb per gel, and it's like
Mhm.
$2 a gel.
Yeah, I think they had. I use it as well, and because I'm cheap.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty good, and they actually did a. I don't know if you saw their. What is the big holiday with the sales? The
Black
Black Friday.
Friday? Yeah.
So they never do sales, and then they were like, oh. So then they made a table of like everyone's Black Friday deal versus just their price, and they still came out on top. So
Yeah. Yeah. It is and honestly one of my favorite gels, truly.
Mm.
Like it's a little bit thinner consistency, neutral flavor. It goes down easy for me. Like
One of the highest carbs per
yeah,
gel
for
too.
sure. Yeah,
Mm.
it's 50 grams. I mean, Precision's 30, Morton's $5 one is like 40. So I
Yeah,
mean, for $2 for 50 grams, I mean that's a bargain. So
yeah,
if you're looking for gels and you really like gels, that would be one that I would look at. And then intermixing some real food. But then on race day, I find doing just the sports fuel products on race day is the route to go, because you're not dealing with wrappers. It's in order to get enough carbs through just real food on race day, you have to carry a lot of it on you and deal with a lot of
yeah.
logistics in getting and taking in all of that. So I tend to go for what's the quickest, easiest to carry and store on myself and take
Right.
in on race day. But then in training, you can save yourself a little money with some real food.
Love it. Yeah, it feels like the real food. There's like that Alan Lim Feed Zone cookbook type real
Yeah.
food movement there for a while. Probably corresponded with the like not eating enough a little bit. Not that it was their fault, but sort of there. But yeah, now I feel like every kid I see even is just like slamming down, gels, and you're like, whoa, that's like a $30 right you got going there.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's great. I think that's a great message that, yeah, you can still do like some granola bars and stuff for some rides too, and sort of a
Yeah,
mix.
absolutely. And then, it changes it up flavor wise too, because it's really easy to get some flavor fatigue if you're using the same exact sports fuel day in and day out. Like you can get tired of it, and we need to keep this enjoyable and fun and palatable. And so I'm a huge fan of having multiple options to fuel with.
I love it. Okay. Well, I think that's a good one to finish on. So people can find you at alexlarsonnutrition.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then your Instagram is great too. And that's Alex Larson Nutrition on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll put that in the show. Anything else that you wanted to link to or?
Well, I do have my own podcast as well. It's new. It started
right.
this year. It's called Endurance Eats, and season 2 will come out here starting in July.
Awesome.
It's just all endurance nutrition topics and I'm really excited for season 2. I've got some good stuff coming down the pipeline.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll link to that as well. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.